say some things.
Hello. Adventure.
Love.
Connection.
Risk.
Passion.
Evolution.
Play.
Life, the Archetypal Tarot Podcast. Provocative mythology for the 21st century.
Aloha, Julianne here. Sandera and I are over the moon excited to share our conversation with deck creator, artist, and magic maker, Chris Ann. You might know her from her wildly cool The Lightseer's Tarot. In this episode, we discuss her brand new deck, the Tarot of Curious Creatures. With their illuminating conversations and grounded wisdom, the curious and quirky characters in this 78+1 deck are a strangely familiar twist on the traditional tarot. And we think you're going to love it. Enjoy. Aloha. Hello, Chris Ann.
Hi, how are you? It's so nice to be here.
I know. We're very, very excited. Sandera and I are both here together in our Zoom universe with you across 3 time zones. So it's my morning, your afternoon, and you're still morning, Sandera.
That's right. Good morning from over here on the Pacific.
Time is an abstract concept. So yes, we're both really, really excited to meet you. We have a copy of your new deck, which we'll be talking about. Chris Ann, you have made something utterly delightful, the Tarot of Curious Creatures. And what Sandera and I were discussing how much we love this deck for reals. And one of the things that is a little bit different, and there's a handful of things that are really different about your deck, other than the fact that they're all animals, you have a guide at the beginning where we work with the deck. First thing, you figure out who your guide is. Do you mind sort of sharing with our listeners what that process is? And then Sandera and I will talk about what we picked and what that process was like for us.
Absolutely. With this deck, this happened partway through the creation process. I often will, when I'm creating a deck, I want to do a little bit of path working with it. I want to get to know the creatures a little bit more. In this case, they were creatures, the characters, the landscapes of the deck. And I realized partway through that this deck was going to be really unique for path working for me. And I was hoping it would be really unique for path working for other people as well, because with these kind of humanimals where they're human bodies and animal heads, they had different gestures that they could do than the regular animals could do, because they could give you a high five or, because they've got their human bodies and their animal heads. But then they had this sort of innate animal wisdom that I wasn't expecting. When I was creating the deck, I really expected it to be just quirky and fun and kind of playful. And I didn't realize that it was going to be the tool that it became, as far as going a little bit deeper and getting wisdom in a different way. So I had to write up front in the guidebook, write in, okay, you need to pick your guide. And what that process is really similar to if anyone that's listening has gone through and chosen like their light and their shadow card and the Lightseers, where you kind of go through and you look at the card. It's similar where I want people to connect with the deck. I hope that they'll connect with the deck in this way, that they go through it and they actually kind of face up, take a peek at all of the cards and just see which one calls out to them, which one calls to your soul, which one is like making you curious and making you want to flip the page to the guidebook and making you want to know a little bit more. They just kind of, they're calling to you. And that particular card then is the guide. It's your guide in the deck. And then my thinking on it is that when your guide shows up after you've had this connection with your guide, that it's just a little bit of an extra special sauce, a little extra something in the reading, because it's there and you have a stronger connection with it if you've gone through the process and gotten to know that guide and done a little bit of mind's eye conversation and path working. Then all of a sudden there's just this little friend in the deck that has a little bit of extra meaning.
How many people have bought tarot decks because they like the imagery, and then it sits on the shelf for ages and ages and ages, and they never form that bond? And I feel like that could have happened to me with this deck, but because of this process, I feel immediately bonded with the images in this tarot card, and I want to get to know all of the characters. So, it was hard for me to pick my guide because there were so many possibilities. I managed to narrow it down to 2. But what about you, Julianne? What was your experience choosing the guide and how that helped you relate with the deck?
It was it was a lot of fun. And the way you explained it was exactly the way I would do it. And I like the way you're already in the guidebook, you're talking like the first person, the guide is talking to you. And it's adorable, but it's exactly the way I wanted to feel. And so the process was easy. I mean, I went through, I did an unboxing video as soon as we got the decks. And so there were already a few that I was like, oh, that's interesting. But in taking the time to look at everything, I was pretty quick. It's just like, yes, no, smaller and smaller piles. And then I really tried to not look at what the card was. Like I tried in my mind's eye to just erase the name of the card or the number of the card, because I didn't want to pick something because I know what it means. And that's
Totally.
what I want. I know that's important. And that's an exercise in and of itself. But I wanted to really commune with the images on the card. And so I ended up with like 3. And then I just did a quick glance. I looked away, I glanced, and I'm done. That is it. That is the one. And then I realized some of the imagery in the card just really spoke to me on second thought. The first glance, I didn't see it, but on second thought, I'm like, perfect. And that is it. And then it ended up being like a really sweet card too. I'm like, who wouldn't pick that one? But shall I reveal
curious.
what
I'm so curious.
Should I reveal?
Curious. We're curious.
Dun, 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 dun.
Oh,
The Queen of Cups.
Queen of Cups. I know it is. It felt like, of course, I would pick that one, but just
Julianne,
innate. What?
will you, for our listeners, would you just describe it?
I will describe it. I was going to do that. So, the Queen of Cups is very much an innately feminine card. The animal is a seal, a beautiful feminine seal. She is wearing a crown. She's sitting in a beautiful golden chair. Over her blue dress, she has a net sort of covering her part of her dress. She's wearing a starfish necklace. And then something that really caught my eye is there's almost draped above her, what would you call them? Not pennants, but there's a string, and the string is strung with starfish and stones and ocean wood. And that immediately reminded me of a rosary or prayer beads, and something that I also make are rosaries and prayer beads. So, and then of course, it's love. There's a little oyster with a pearl, and she's just confident and relaxed. And in the card, the seal's head is kind of turned toward the side in profile, but it really looks like she's just listening. She's just sitting there. It says, you're in the chair next to her, and she's turned her head and she's listening, and she's got her beautiful red goblet in her lap. So this one really, really called to me. There were a bunch of others, but this one, I was like, yep, you're my guide. And we do have seals here. We have an endemic monk seal in Hawaii. They're very, they're endangered, and they're pretty rarely seen. I think I've only seen them in person maybe 4 times. And it's a very special moment when you get to see a monk seal, especially in the water. So a lot of connection to my Irish ancestry as well with seals and silkies. So it's a good one.
I love this because I can totally see this in you. And I feel like if it comes up in a reading for me now, I'll be like, you know what? What would Julianne say right now? What would Julianne's guide say right now to me, to my problem that I'm bringing to the card? So I love this. And we just interviewed someone who wrote a fictional book about, the each character is connected to a tarot card, and you can actually call on that person in the deck, and they come along, they get transported or whatever. And I've always resisted about having real people in the cards, and I'm like, oh, it's all metaphorical, it's all archetypal, but I kind of love that personal element now. Like, what would Julianne say right now? I want to have her in my heart and a big part of my life. So this is very special, Julianne. Thanks for sharing that. I'll go ahead and share with you mine. So narrowed it down to 2. I'm a Gemini. I'm just going to take dual liberties here. But I got
you get 2 guides.
I get 2 guides because I feel like they're working together as a team. So I got the 2 of Wands, who is holding,
so
it's a cat woman, and she's...
I have that one out too.
Yeah, you got that one out too. It's so good. She holds 2 wands or 2 sticks that I love sticks. I've played with them since I was a kid, but she's got the key and she's got the lock. And I feel like she's helping to make decisions. When you don't know which one to choose, she's going to come forward and help you make that choice. And then I love the image of the pathway in the back going through the door. She might be sometimes a little distracted away from her path because she's making decisions in the moment, but I think eventually she's going to figure it out, and that door is open for her. And it also draws up that word of path working, Chris Ann, which I never knew this was like a synonym to active imagination. How did I not know this, Julianne? I guess I'm a dummy, but I was too distracted looking at one of my sticks of life to realize that path working was like the same thing. But anyway, maybe we can talk about that. But the other card that I have chosen is the Queen of Swords. And Julianne knows about my love of owls and their connection to wisdom. She's an air sign, swords, Gemini once again, and she's wearing teal. That's my favorite color. And she just looks like, as opposed to the cat, she's seated and looking within and connecting to her inner wisdom and purpose, and is a dreamer and connected to all those images in her mind and her dreams. And so I think she balances out really well that inner wisdom with the looking outward and problem solving in real life, which I feel like this cat is pretty good at. So those were my 2, and how much fun I felt like. Really felt supported by them today as I narrowed those down.
That the Queen of Swords, she was the one image in the deck when she was one of the first ones that I created. I would say the first maybe 5. And when I start to create something, the first 3 or 4 images, like maybe it's not going to be a thing, because you just kind of start and yeah, we'll see where this goes. And I meander down the creation process, but it was the Queen of Swords, that owl, and getting that card done. It was in that moment, she was like yes, this is happening. Wow. This is going to be a deck. She was something about the expression, or, and she really made me laugh a lot when I was creating her. While she looks really serene, kind of sitting in her chair in the final image, finding different owl heads and what expressions I was going to use. And because we went through this process, I have an assistant, we kind of look, okay, different photos and where are we going to pull the owl head from, and how is this going to work? And this particular image, I felt like she was so chatty. The face, I don't know, she felt like she made me laugh as this kind of very chatty, air sign, communicative Queen of Swords, kind of like she was very royal and regal, but at the same time, like la la la, like she's just going on. And
how did you know me, Kristen? How did you know who I was? But I love that you're saying this reaction, this authentic feeling you had of laughter when you saw the image, because this is the first deck in my experience that I have looked at the images and just let out laughter that is just coming out of my being. And so many tarot cards are beautiful and meaningful and exploratory and extraordinary in so many ways, but this deck is what made me laugh in the most joyous, playful way. And I was like, I hope she's not offended that I'm laughing at all of her cards, but they really opened that part of me up, which I just love.
Yay, that is everything I dream for this deck. everything I dream for this deck is that it will allow us to be playful in our pursuit of understanding ourselves, and allow us to bring that laughter to this, like, sometimes very serious work, and allow us, that was because I laughed a lot. Like, there's not a card that I didn't laugh at some point, like, it's because they're ridiculous, because they're animal heads on human bodies, but somehow they work.
They totally work. And I'm actually curious. So are some of them look like they're old photographs that have, like, what here is and I love that it's not clear, but like, what here is photograph, collage, painting, drawing? Like, I don't even know. So can you tell us a little bit about the artwork and how it happened?
Absolutely. So I am a graphic designer by, like, trade. That's what I studied in school. And so it is a combination of all of the, well, not painting, but it's a combination of photo collage and then digital painting, which is why it's sort of ambiguous, where on top, where it doesn't look 100% like a photo collage, because that photo collage tends to be quite flat. I've gone in, I've painted a lot of shadows and light, like highlights and things that needed to connect, and added skin where I needed to add skin, or like on this, the Queen of Cups seal, kind of putting the pattern of the seal on the human arm. So there's a lot of painting on top of, it's really a digital mixed media.
It's beautiful, and they really come off the card. Like, every single one of them really are a doorway, and there's a 3D effect to them. There's a lot of leaves that are coming in over the corners. There's definitely a gestalt feeling to all of them. I brought out the Seven of Pentacles because he's a red squirrel, also another favorite card, but he's leaning against the edge of the card. I love that. Like, it's very easy to relate to these cards. They're animals, you have to take a step of the imagination, but you really can relate to them. It's just utterly delightful. And I think for people who they might have their go-to decks for certain things, but because as long as you've got the creative mind to talk with the human animal blend, that's the only sort of barrier. But if you get beyond that, they're so, they're animals. There's no race, there's no religion, they are animals. They are the animal part of us. So I think that makes them not only fun, but also really, relatable and specific and neutral at the same time, in a great way.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it was, creating them and coming up with this, because I thought when I started, it was kind of a crazy idea. Very different than anything I've ever created. I don't consider myself to be, like, I'm really silly, but I'm not funny. You know what I mean? Like, I have this very silly, playful humor, and I do a lot of silly things that make people laugh, but it's not because I'm witty. Like, I have that kind of silly, playful humor. And so I don't consider myself a funny person. And I thought, I want to do this deck. Is it going to land in the right way? Or are people going to look at me like, what? What is this deck that's so different from the other stuff that I've done? But, I had my teenage nephews here in January of 2020. They were visiting from Chile for the month. So they came for our winter, and we would go snowboarding together. So there was all of this childlike youth energy in the house, and just having them in the house. And, what do you do with teenage boys? We bought, like, packs of 100 stickers, and like put stickers on everything, like, just all of this really youthful stuff that is not a normal part of my world. We don't have kids. And I think just having them here brought out that part of me even more. And that's when I started the deck, just sitting. We were actually watching something. I think we were around the TV. I think they were playing Nintendo with my husband, or not Nintendo, PlayStation. And I was not really interested in what they were doing, but I wanted to be in the room. So I had my computer, and I just started playing with this collage. And it was the Justice card that was the first card that I did. And it was just from this moment of, I'm just playing. And then my nephew looked over and started laughing at the screen, because he's like, you have this parrot head on a body, and what are you doing? And then I realized really quickly that I was just enjoying myself so much that I wanted more of that.
And the title of the deck is the Tarot of Curious Creatures. So it could have been named all kinds of things, but the fact that it's great alliteration, but the curious curiosity of the animals coming through in the cards. I felt that I did a reading this morning with these cards that really helped me with a personal ordeal. But one thing that I came to the cards with is that element of curiosity. And can you tell us about the importance of that? Because it must be really central to, your approach to things, that it would end up in the title and guide these guides to us.
Well, curiosity for me is a value for sure, just remaining childlike as far as what comes next, and even childlike from the place of who am I? I am constantly giving myself permission to change my mind and to just a lifestyle, I guess, or to change my trajectory in the world. I am, like right now, I am studying part-time. Well, it's actually part-time and a half. So I'm studying acupuncture, which I also studied 8 years ago, which seems like it's such a strange thing because it has nothing to do, I'm doing air quotes here, with the work that I do, but I go back to school every 8 years or so. That's just part of what I do. And I go back and I study something either that maybe seems unrelated, but in some shape or form that I just have this insatiable curiosity for life and things and how humans work and how our bodies work. And right now my curiosity is about the energy in the body. And so I want to go to school for that. And I seem to be on an 8-year cycle where I'll go back to school every 8 years or so. Don't necessarily work in the field that I'm studying, but it's like I collect creative ingredients, or I collect, they are ingredients because I can't create from the same all the time. So it's sort of forced growth, I suppose. So I am curious as a human. It's part of who I am. But as far as the title, that was actually not my first choice for title. And because I worked with a publishing company, I worked with Hay House, they didn't love the title that I wanted. And so we went back and forth a lot. And I actually asked people in my community, and I put it out to Instagram, and please help me with a name. And Tarot of Curious Creatures was one that kept coming up, and it was always doing well when I asked people, do you like this or that? And they would say 80% like the Tarot of Curious Creatures. And then I would not love it and say, well, what about this one? Because I kept hoping that they would choose a different name, but now I love the name. So it's funny the way that works.
Do you mind sharing with us what your original title was?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. It was, I wanted something familiar. And it was too abstract for marketing, I think, because just something familiar, because they felt like they were sort of familiars, but not. And it's sort of a familiar take on tarot, but not. It's kind of peculiar. And so something familiar felt like poetic, I suppose. I like things that sound kind of abstract and poetic, but you wouldn't know what it was if you heard about that deck.
Yeah.
So from Hay House was 100% right,
And I feel like everything has its extroverted title, and maybe it's like secret inner title. And so it's really nice to hear what you had thought of first, because I do feel that when I look at the cards, I feel something familiar.
And they have this, like, some of them have this storybook or fairy tale quality to them. And that also was that I wanted that play on that, but it just wasn't the right title for this. But somewhere in the guidebook, and I'm not sure where it is, but I think it's either in the, it does say something familiar is in there in some shape or form.
And I just want to thank you for your guidebook, because I think it's becoming more common that this stopping and saying, okay, have your own direct relationship with the cards. You can read the book or not read the book, but this is about your connection to them. And that's going to be different for everyone. That's going to be very unique. And that's very important to the book that I'm writing about intuitive storytelling and card readings. And so that invitation, I just am so grateful for. And it's both humble and truthful and sure of itself to offer that up to the reader, the viewer in this regard. So I want to just genuinely thank you for that.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine doing it any other way. I am someone who, if someone says you must do it this way, my first reaction is often why, even if that, because I just am not, there's just too many perspectives and people and ideas and ways, and the world is, there's so much gray in the world that when someone says it's black or white in anything, I am like, no, I have to think about that first before I trust it. And so that is, of course, the way I read cards as well, and the way that I hope that other people will do the same. Everything that we learn from other people, because we can learn so much from other people, and I am always learning stuff from other people as well. But at the same time, everything that they say, it always goes through that critical filter, that critical thinking. Does this make sense? And is this what's going to work for me? And so, yeah, that invitation is always, I'm glad to see that happening more and more in the tarot world, to be honest with you. I think in the past, there was kind of this is the right way. Like, I still get questions from people who ask me things like, oh, I heard that I need to be gifted my first deck and I really want to read cards. And like all of those rules that I think are just, someone made them up, so you can unmake them up. But go buy yourself a deck.
That's right. And I'm so happy you're saying this thing about the black and the white, because as we see this increasing polarized viewpoint, especially, being on social media and trying to post somewhere in between, or a perspective, it just attacks from the extremes. And I think tarot is really here as a tool to show the complexity and the nuances and the deeper stories and the full stories that can come from each individual, multiple individuals, relationships. They're really revealed through these images and explorations that you can do intuitively, right? So
absolutely,
it's a great gift. I'm so glad the world is having all these versions of tarot and having these conversations. But yeah, you're right, those rules, they kind of linger around, and that was a huge part of our podcast too, right, Julianne, is that we wanted to kind of dispel the superstitions and the fears and the murkiness that was like, you have to do it A, B, and C always. And these conversations, I think, really open up those rigidities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think our approach is understand the rules and understand the reason for them. It's like the old adage, like, and we're in a Hierophant year, and I've been thinking about the Hierophant like a lot this year, and kind of seeing where it's coming up, and do you rebel just for rebellion's sake, or do you kind of understand, oh, that would be why that is? And if you have that understanding, your own relationship with something it is then relationship. It's not just black or white. That's why these two things are there. But like, I'm in the middle, and what's the context? So that's where you're going to get the truth, where it's coming through you. And you're not simply going, well, they're wrong. It's like, well, no, understand the perspectives, understand the rule, and then you can break it. But just breaking it because you don't understand it is not going to help anybody. And having animal perspectives, which you do in your guidebook, is lovely, because it is very nuanced and layered, because there's the tarot meaning that we've learned, the classic, but there's also symbolism with the animal. You've given some perspective with each card. There is the conversation with the animal, what the animal says. And I've worked with animal symbols since I was probably in high school. So there's a whole nother layer there of like, what is the nature of lizard? What is the nature of bear? And you can kind of take that with you. If you've gotten what you needed from the card, it's there. But if something is pinging you, you follow that intuition to, let me learn more about the nature of that animal and where they live and how they live. And that can also, they're just rich. There's so much there. You can take what you need, but if something's still pinging your intuition, there's plenty more that you can go to for information. So
absolutely, the guidebook I found it really tough to write the guidebook for this deck, because there's such limited space, and that guidebook could have been 10 times as long, because going into the nature of the animal and the tarot, and then bringing in all of it could be a whole series of books. Mm-hmm. So I really had a hard time pulling that one back. Yeah, for sure.
Were you forced to keep it into a tiny version, or
Yes.
yeah, so that they were like, this is what sells maybe, and time to contain it in the tiny book. I'm wondering if I'm going to run into that working on my own book, because it's not a tiny and there's so much wisdom, right? You can't encapsulate, and that must have been very difficult.
Yeah, for sure. And that happened with all of the decks with when you're working with a publisher, because they sort of have and they have this whole other side of it where they know how much space it needs to take up on a bookshelf, or how many boxes have to fit in a certain, how many decks have to fit in a box in order to ship to a certain place. And so, you are really constrained. And this was the first one that I didn't do as an independent creator first. My other decks, I did my own indie version. I wrote the book I wanted, and then I pulled it back and condensed it. And so there's so much value in both, because some people don't want 10 pages on one card. There's a lot of people that just want they want the 2 concise pages, give me what I need, and then they're going to do all. And some people don't even read the guidebook. There's a lot of people that will never read the guidebook at all, and that's great too. So yeah. So for me as the creator, this one was the first time that I have worked with the publisher first and didn't do my own version. So that was a whole new experience, knowing that right from the get-go I had to be really concise. And I'm pretty verbose. Like, I write and I'm wordy, and I like to write poetically, and I like a lot of adjectives. And so really pulling them all out right from the get-go, I felt like some of those poor little curious creatures had so much more to say.
They'll open up directly into the souls of the people who can converse with them, I'm sure.
1,000,000%, yes.
And so your deck is also unique in that you have 2 Fool cards, and the Fool is very special to us. That's how we got started on our journey, right? It was the Fool's journey, and we thought, we don't have to be perfect. We can show up, press record, and totally be like fools talking about tarot archetypes. And so this is a deck close to our hearts, because we got 2 Fools here. One looks like it's the 0 Fool, the other one's the Infinite Fool, the 2.0. Tell us about this decision, about the dual Fools.
It's I fell in love with the idea of the dog, because one of them has it's the only card that just has an animal. The dog, kind of this playful puppy sort of energy that the Fool embodies, but also for the deck I wanted people to kind of feel like they were jumping off and going on this journey and being kind of silly, because he's jumping off the cliff, and he's looking at us, and he's like, oh, like that puppy smile, right? This sort of silliness. But I also needed the humanimal, which would have been like that, the dog head on the human body. And I did both cards. I loved them both. And then really, I was just thinking about the majors, and the way some decks will have the Fool at the end of the majors and some will have it at the beginning, because it is this kind of, you get to the world and then it's time to start a new journey again. And I really wanted to highlight that sense of, we can always start new journeys. And then I started really thinking, well, where is the one Fool? Because I thought I was going to do one Fool. Where will it go? Will it potentially go at the end of the arc, at the end of the majors, just to have this really highlight that playfulness and that idea that we can just jump off the cliff, like we're never done, right? I really wanted to highlight that sense of we're never done growing. And I started feeling into that, and I realized that in my own mind, the Fool that comes at the end of the world felt slightly different than the Fool that comes at the beginning. And I was wondering why that is, and one is sort of this, well, I've completed this journey, but it just felt like there was a slight nuance where one is, okay, here we go again. And one is, wow, I've never, ever done this before. And so I wanted to bring both of those Fool energies in. And then, of course, because one is the actual animal and one is the humanimal animal.
Humanimal.
I guess. I was like, well, which one should be first? Because in my mind, is the human more involved than the animal? I don't really believe that, but it just made sense in the flow of the deck to have the little dog first and then the actual humanimal dog as the Fool 2.0 at the end of the majors. Yeah.
I love it. And it made complete sense. Like I didn't even have to question it. And then I was talking with Sandera and I'm like, well, that's us. We're kind of, I feel like we're the Fool 2.0 with our endeavor with this podcast. And there is, such a thing as a wise fool, you've been through all the things, and yet you're still willing to jump off a cliff again. Or, as I like to talk about with a fool, sometimes it's not your own choice. Frequently, it's like you've been swept off the cliff.
Mm-hmm.
But the Fool 2.0 still has that like, whoa, here we go again. And they don't have a handle on the situation, but they know that it's okay not to have a handle on the situation.
Absolutely. There's a little bit there, right? A little more experience to kind of be okay with not knowing. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And there's still innocence. And I think that is something in our modern world in it. And there's something very innocent about your deck. And I'm trying to remember who said it, but innocence is the ability to be found by the world. That is so important. It's so easy to get cynical and, like, oh, I've seen this before. So anything that kind of brings that back and reminds us of, and it's being found by the world, but being found by ourselves as well. So yeah, I think the timing of releasing this deck, I think, is marvelous for us as we're dealing with all of the things that we've got to deal with now.
Trying to find ourselves again. Collectively, for sure. I love that. I've never heard that innocence is being found by the world. And that is, it's going to give me something to journal about.
Oh, well, you're welcome. I wish I could remember who said it. It could be David White, the poet. It could be. But
we'll look it up. We will post it in our information.
I am famous for there's a great quote. No idea who said it. Pretty much every podcast has I know this thing. I'm sorry, whoever said it.
Speaking of journaling, your whole guidebook really has opportunities for people to reflect and journal on the images that they're seeing. And I appreciated that. It was right from the get-go. And then for each card, you have questions and windows. And I think there's a little cute quote in here about, notice that as you looked at me, that the frame of the card is not unlike a doorway. So you're offering these doorways into personal reflection that I think are really rich, because I usually kind of rebel against journal prompts, but these ones were grabbing me. And I had a life situation and I did your guidance spread, and I found it just brought so much clarity, and it actually led to action in addressing a personal relationship that needed to be addressed. So and I just want to share what the questions are for each card, because I felt they were really handy for a tarot spread. So the first one is, could you give me the tough love about my situation? And I love that. It's just an invitation for okay, just give me the full skinny, what is really going on here? Don't spare my feelings. Don't sugarcoat it, just what do I need to look at in the situation? And then the second card asks for compassion. Could you give me some compassion? And that's the wonderful flip side. It's not sugar coated, but it's a way to open that doorway into your heart and be like, okay, what's a deeper part of this story that I need to connect with socially, emotionally, and then the third one is what's the outcome that we will walk toward. And then there's a fourth card. I rebelled against the spread. I didn't do the fourth card, but it was where should I focus my energy? So that could be even more information if you want it. And then you can put your guide card down there to help converse with all of the other cards. This is a great spread. And I just really felt that I was able to, and of course, always happens with the tarot for me, the absolutely perfect cards fell into the perfect places. And I was able to see shadow aspects of myself in the first card, as well as, recognizing what I felt towards the other person. The second card opened up a compassion towards the person I was having some hard feelings about. And the third one, it was just such a perfect card. Where is it? It was another seal. No, it was the otter, the star. Where did she go? Oh yes, right here. So there's just this serenity and connection to the divine and connection with the deepest wisdom within herself. This otter was perfect medicine for the whole situation. I was like, yeah, I'm feeling all of these things, but in the end, this is what I want to do. So I reached out to the person and we had a conversation, and all is resolved now. And the cards helped me to gather those energies and courage, really, in myself to spark that difficult conversation. So I know I'm speaking all in vague terms, but I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. It's so nice. You know what? I love when people, it's just so beautiful. It's such a beautiful testament to the power of tarot to be able to like have something that's a situation with a relationship, put some cards on the table, and then immediately be able to take action and have something resolved. And that is the beauty of tarot, isn't it? We just get this like wisdom from it, and it's, is it from the cards? Is it from our higher self? Is it from the guides? Is it from, I don't know. Depends on the person, but it's such a beautiful testament to the art of tarot and the craft of tarot to be able to have immediately resolved that. I'm so happy to hear that, and I'm happy for you. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Well, they work, that I can, at least for me, I can say that, I tried them out, and they're that's good news. They're wonderful.
That's
like
one of. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying I can imagine somebody who, there aren't that many stores left, but, to walk in your local metaphysical bookstore and was like, can you give me a tarot deck that works? I'm sure that happens all the time. Like, this one's broken. It's giving me bad news, and I want one that works. So we're just going to say that the Tarot of Curious Creatures, it's a deck that works. How you like that? As your marketing, it's a deck that works.
They've been tested.
You can't break them. They're animals, for crying out loud. Mm-hmm. They're humanimals. What did you call them?
Humanimals. Yes.
Humanimals. I love that. I adore that.
I didn't make it up. I was out when I was thinking about doing the deck, and I had 2 or 3 cards only, and I went out for lunch with a friend. I'm in a fairly new city, or a new place for us. We've just not the place is not new, but we recently moved here.
Got you.
And was just out for lunch with someone that I recently met, and said, I'm doing this thing, and I didn't know it at the time, but she is a giant Humanimals fan. Like, she was just, oh my goodness, I love, and she said, I love Humanimals. And I didn't know that was a word until, so I didn't coin it. I'm sure, I don't know who did, but it's a word that I've adopted for sure for this deck, because it is exactly what they are.
It is. Oh my gosh, they're lovely.
One of the things that I did with that spread that you were speaking about, Sindera, was a way that I love to use cards is always using that, like, whether it's the guide card in this deck or a guide card in any deck that any of your listeners have. You could really do this with any deck, where you pick a guide and you pick a card that's special to you. And I will do this for a lot of spreads, especially when it comes to working on myself. Sometimes it's so easy to read for other people, and it's a little bit more difficult sometimes to get the information for ourselves. And so I will do this in a lot of different ways, where I will actively pick certain cards, and it depends on the spread. In that spread, it was just put your guide out and they can help us to interpret the other cards. That's really helpful. When the card characters, when you can have this information seemingly coming from a third party, it's just so much more relevant somehow, because we feel like we're not making it up. It's like we're one step removed from that process. But I'll also do it when I'm looking for, whether it's goals or wondering about a certain situation, or especially it works really well when it's, where I am and where I want to be. And I will go through the deck and actively choose a card. Well, this card represents where I want to go. So I'll put it out and then, okay, let's pick a card for where I am. And then I'll randomly pick the one in the middle and let them have a conversation. There's just so much illuminated in that type of card pull where you actively pick a few of the cards to have the conversation that needs to be had. I think that's probably, I don't know of anyone else that puts that into their guidebooks or that pulls cards that way, but I do find it so incredibly useful. So I've started to write it into the guidebooks. You know, you can choose a card here to have that conversation about the whole spread, and you can get some really unique wisdom from the deck that way.
I love it. That is basically the heart of active imagination in the Jungian sense, where you are, you know, letting that conversation happen that needs to happen. And frequently that's all that needs to happen. You know, like that is information that is sitting there waiting for you, and you're just giving yourself the gift of opening it up. And cards are incredibly useful for that. And then you'll still have, I think, ways to go back and get more from it. So I'm a big believer in that ping of intuition of like, why am I afraid of crows or whatever it is? You know, why is there a little, like, you know, there's a little shadow element, or there's something there that's like, I don't know, but it's like, oh, it's an animal, and there's something in there that you can wait for later. You know, it's sitting there, it's waiting for you. It'll show up again if you're ignoring it. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been utterly delightful. I know we've kind of reached over an hour, but we could talk for even more. Thank you so much for your contribution. Do you have anything else that you want to share before we have to say aloha?
You know, I just thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast. Congratulations for 10 years. That is a giant milestone in the podcast world. And I feel honored to be able to be here with you guys and celebrate that with you. That's just, phenomenal.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. We received that, and we are incredibly chuffed that we've got Chris Ann on the podcast.
Aww.
We got Chris Ann on the podcast for
we
sure.
We can all fangirl on one another.
We can fangirl.
That's right.
We're fangirling 100%. It's good. It's good. It's like one of my teachers, Jean Houston, used to say, you know, now is the time and we are the people. And it's even better when we all get together, right?
Absolutely.
Now is the time and we are the humanimals. We're here.
We are the humanimals.
Thank you so much, Chris Ann, and we hope to see you for your next deck, perhaps. I can't wait to see what you got in the works. Or maybe we should come for acupuncture. Maybe that's a point.
Thank you so much.
Love it. Aloha to you, Chris Ann. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. We know that you could have done something else with the last 47 minutes of your life, but we're so glad that you spent it with us. Connect with Chris Ann on Instagram. Her handle is @PixieCurio, and her website is chris-ann.com, and that's Ann with an E. And just so you know, the Tarot of Curious Creatures is going to be available November 2nd, and you can pre-order it on her website or all the usual places that you get your tarot decks. And as always, you can stay in touch with us. We're on Instagram and Facebook @Tarot Podcast. Our email is tarotpodcast@gmail.com. And now, drum roll please, both Sindera and I are on Clubhouse. More about shenanigans there soon. And just so you know, this episode is sponsored by Free Range Priestess on Etsy. You'll find unconventional rosaries, quirky prayer beads, jewelry, and more. The website is freerangepriestess.com, and on Etsy, just search for Free Range Priestess. And big, ginormous, huge mahalos and thanks going out to our patrons, Joro, Peter, Janet, Richard, Juniper, and Rash of Stay Woke Tarot. We appreciate our patrons and their support so much. And if you are curious about how you can be one of the cool people and the great benefits of being a patron, just go to tiny.cc/tarot podcast. This podcast is produced by Both And Media, and our theme music is by The Lunar Group. Ahui ho, until next time.